Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm got my notes here. I'm Peter D, aka Peter D Rose, aka Peter Rose. So, but as an artist, I'm known as Peter Rose, Peter D Rose. Thanks, Mike, for having me to come along and have a talk. I was just basically going to come and talk about my life through the music business and what I've been involved with, and yeah, just basically my influences and my travels, my journeys, and just share it with you. I mean, I've got a long list here. I mean, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? And then the list became longer and longer, you know. So I just start at the beginning. I'm first and foremost a producer, turned DJ. I started off doing music in about 1986. I self-taught myself how to get involved with music, how to make music, how to produce music. I'm self-taught. I mean, it started off by first me wanted to be in a band. Didn't quite happen. Everybody was too lazy and no one would turn up. So I just thought, you know what, at that very time, that moment in time, a lot of digital equipment was being made, like little drum machines and synthesizers, and I was like, do you know what, I don't need a drummer, I could just buy one of these drum machines, you know, to make my beats for me. Yeah, the reliable machine. You know? And it was like this little square blue box, like a little tin with two black buttons on there and a knob, and you would select what instrument you want and you would tap in the beats, like 1, 2, 3, 4, space, 5, 6, 7, 8, space, and you press start and it would just play a beat. I was like, wicked, this is good, you know. Then I sort of got into multi-track recording. You know, I had I had a reel-to-reel machine, and realised that on my reel-to-reel machine you could record separate tracks. One on the left channel, I could record something on the right channel, and I could then record my drum machine on one side, one channel, and if I got myself a keyboard that played bass, I could record that on the other channel. And then I'll have a beat and bass line. And that was kind of my journey, starting into being self-taught, because at the time in Bristol, I wanted to actually I actually wanted to study music production, and at that time, like in the mid-80s in Bristol, there wasn't really any colleges in Bristol at the time that you could go to do that. I would have had to go to Manchester, or Birmingham, or London. So I was sort of forced to do it the DIY style, which was quite poignant at that time, because, you know, that was the kind of a period where punk was still about a bit, and the whole punk ethos was about do it yourself, and that's where I was coming from. I'd done it myself, you know, and I then got involved with meeting up with people on the club circuit. Now, I'm not really sure which bit I talk about first, because it all sort of ties in, but as Mike said, I met him on this board about the nighttime economy, and for me it was I got asked to do it, to get involved by the mayor himself, and I was like, do you know what, I will get involved with this, because I felt quite passionate about the music in Bristol and the Bristol music scene, because as far as I'm concerned, the Bristol music scene birthed what we have today. It was my playground, it was my formative years in this scene, just like a lot of successful musicians, like Smith and Mighty, who I will come back to, who I'm involved with, Massive Attack, Tricky, Portishead, DJ Derek, Koshi. These bands are all successful bands from Bristol internationally, not just nationally. You know, and people who was into the arts, like graffiti art, like Banksy, you know, people like that. If we didn't have that club scene, you know, I think it's quite possible that these artists wouldn't have been birthed in the way that they did. So for me, it was quite important to sort of support the club scene, especially knowing that a lot of them was being closed down or under threat of being closed down in Bristol. You know, I wanted Bristol to be recognised, as Mike said, I want Bristol to be recognised as a music of arts and culture and music, especially because on my journeys with the band called Smith and Mighty, who I started off with, we travelled a lot. I mean, I was travelling, touring the world for about 10 years on the road. From about 1997 to about 2006, I was travelling, we were travelling, promoting our albums. And it just occurred to me that everybody that I was speaking to, that we would do interviews all the time and meet people in the clubs, in these places, and they're like, oh, what's Bristol like? What's Bristol like? Must be really wicked there. Bristol's brilliant, and they think that one big party is going on. But they would, you know, but they would really speak good of Bristol. Oh, you've got that group coming from Bristol. You've got another group, and they would say all these groups which were named to be which were internationally recognised, and they were from Bristol. But then I would come back to Bristol, and no one would talk about it, and it was quite strange. You know, no one was bigging up Bristol in Bristol. Bristol was being bigged up outside of our shores. And also what I noticed as well, I mean, at the time we were booked, we were signed up as Smith Mighty with a record label called K7 Record, which were based in Germany. And in Germany especially, I noticed that their equivalent of what the council is, they would support their events. The council body would support the events. And again, to me, that was like, do you know what? No one's supporting, the council do not support events like this in Bristol. You know, they were, if anything, they were taking away what we had, or trying to take away what we had, or make it hard for us to put on what we've got. You know, so when this opportunity came up to be a part of this Bristol Nighttime economy, the Bristol Nighttime project, to support the club scene, especially for me, I felt quite passionate about it, and I thought it was quite important. So hence how I met Mike and how I'm here. So to go back to the beginning, I started to do music in the late 80s, teaching myself, and I became involved with a few groups in Bristol. I was bouncing between two camps at the time. I was with a group called Smith and Mighty. Smith and Mighty were considered to, I mean, I think they're pushing it a bit far, but Smith and Mighty is considered to be the godfathers of the Bristol music scene. I don't know if I want to go that far and saying the godfathers. It makes me sound old as well, do you know what I mean? But,
trip hop.
well, you say trip hop, and we can talk about trip hop as well, because that was another term that was phrased or coined by someone not from Bristol. As far as I remember, the whole trip hop scene, we were like, none of us seemed to like that term. Well, I didn't anyway. I mean, I got a story that as Smith and Mighty, I'll go back to the origins of Smith and Mighty in a minute, but while we're on it, when we were supporting Tricky one day at the Hammersmith Palais, he came on stage and said, "Oh, who here is into trip hop?" And everybody went, "Yay!" And he went, "Fuck off home then." None of us kind of like trip hop. You know what I mean? It just sounds crap, doesn't it? You know what I mean? Trip hop. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like hip hop. Do you know what I mean? It's trip hop. You know. But I suppose you've got to have a name to package, to sell. I get it. I understand it. You know. But yeah, so I was involved with I've been involved with, and still am involved with Smith and Mighty, who's considered to be the beginning of the originators of the Bristol Sound. Now, I wouldn't call it the originators, I would call it, we were involved with the development as it was growing at the time, all mixing and exchanging our ideas on the club scene. And I was also bouncing between the Smith and Mighty camp and also the Massive Attack camp, and I was involved with Massive Attack right at the beginning of the writing of the Blue Lines album, which I didn't end up going through signing the record deal with them through You know, little band hiccups, band arguments or whatever it was, but I was with them and then didn't go through with them. But that whole music scene was it was very vibrant at the time. Everybody exchanging their ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other on that club scene. But I guess what we all had in common, and I'm sorry for all the other musicians here, is my fascination of being involved with what was going on was the electronic side of music. For me, it was electronic music. I mean, I wanted to be a musician that played something, but I was pretty crap at playing everything. I could kind of play the drums, but I got the drum machine. but when I found out that I could program a drum kit, it was like, yeah, this is brilliant. When I found out that I could buy what you call a MIDI keyboard and put one wire in one bit of machinery, and then you can connect to another piece of machinery, and you press start, it plays what you programmed into it at the same time. I was like, yeah, this is me. You know. So for me, the fascination was electronic music. You know, and I suppose I got involved with being interested. I mean, my influence, or I don't know, the electronic music thing for me, what excited me was watching bands in the 80s. I mean, like Human League, Duran Duran, things like that. I was like, Kraftwerk, you know? I mean, for me, Kraftwerk was a big influence. I'd seen these guys on stage with these like mad bits of equipment in front of them, and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. You know, because I just like the sounds, I like the, you know, I was really influenced by that group and that 80s electronic music. And I suppose when I met people like Rob Smith and Ray Mighty and Mushroom from Massive Attack, you know, that is what connected us. It was electronic equipment. That's what initially connected us. You know, when I was at Park Street and I had this 4-track machine in my bag, and that's how I met Mushroom from Massive Attack. He was like, "What's that?" I was like, "Oh, I got a 4-track. You want to come and check it out?" And that's how we connected. You know, I met Rob Smith and Ray Mighty when they ran someone else's house, and we were all looking at this drum machine, and that was our connection. You know, so through that we connected on a musical equipment, electronic level. I mean, there's other things that I suppose I started off loving music itself. You know, coming from a Jamaican background. My parents were Jamaican. I mean, when I was young, I remember my gran used to have parties in the basement. Now, at that time, the Jamaican community just coming in from Jamaica to England, living in the 60s, you know, they didn't really have no clubs because they weren't really invited to clubs. I think it was only the Bamboo Club, which was on Portland Square, very famous club, you know, which was run by Tony Billamore, right?
Yeah.
Is it one of that? Tony Billamore? Yeah, that's right, and that's the club that my mum used to go to. But apart from that, there wasn't really no club. First and foremost, it was your house parties, and I grew up in that. You know, I would be upstairs, and I could hear bass line rumbling underneath the floor, and I would be like, you know, 4, 5, 3, 4 years old, you know what I mean, just listening to bass coming through the floorboards, you know, so I grew up with that. And to me, that frequency there, bass, resonated with me. I was a bass junkie from that point onwards, I reckon, you know. I was, you know, the other side of my family, I would go to my dad's, coming up to Christmas times, you know, up to the New Year, we would have parties every day up until New Year's Eve. From Christmas to New Year's, we would have parties. And reggae music was being played all night. And that bass frequency, again, for me, was like, I resonated with that, you know. Going through the 80s, we had the sound, the whole sound, you know. I think the beauty of Bristol is very multicultural. Do you know what I mean? You've got a big Jamaican influence, and a lot of that influence. Well, the influence what I got was from the sound system scene. Now, the Jamaican sound system was all about having speakers like as tall as that, right? because you've got to know I was a bit shorter then. And yeah, we were listening to these sound systems, and I became involved with the sound system scene. And what I mean by sound system, I mean you would have a whole crew, and you'd have big speakers, and you'd have a record deck, and you played reggae music, and you'd have your MC, and you would have your selector, you would have a guy what chooses the music, you'd have another guy that hosts as the MC, and it was who can play the best music if you had a sound system clash, you know. Now the whole sound system ethos it still goes on today, but it stems from the whole Jamaican thing. You know, people call themselves sound systems now, but they're not really sound systems. So I got involved with sound system, being an MC, and I would go to a lot of different sound systems, listen to them as well, because the sound system thing was coming from Jamaica. I would get cassette tapes and listen to all that kind of stuff. So that's what I was getting really deep involved with. And that helped me sort of get my inspiration and my vibe to become a music producer, you know. And being a producer, you know, when I was involved with massive, I mean, I'm bouncing around for things here, but I remember, you know, I was kind of creating a sound system in my bedroom, my poor mum, because I just wanted big speakers in my bedroom and stuff, but it became a focal point. I lived in Easton, and it became a focal point of musicians coming to my house, and my studio was building up around me at that time. And we had, I mean, when I was with the Massive Attack camp, you know, we basically, I can tell you a little bit of stories around that whole thing, you know. And if you guys know Unfinished Sympathy by Shara Nelson, which was a very famous Massive Attack track, you know, Shara Nelson, who sang that track, we actually done one audition in my mum's bedroom, well, my studio in that room in Easton. She came down and auditioned in that room, okay, right? You know, we had loads of equipment at the time, which were, well, I had equipment that I was building up, but at the time, the whole Massive Attack trip that I was involved with, at the time, Smith and Mighty and Massive Attack came up with two, Smith and Mighty came up with tracks. One of them was Walk On By Anyone Who Had a Heart. They were Burt Bacharach cover versions, and they put out these tracks, which were a big underground success. And then after they put out that track, you had other people in Bristol who were making music who wanted to have their music put out as well, because we weren't the only one who was doing it, you know. And you had Massive Attack, who I was not a part of Massive Attack at that time, but Massive Attack came and said, oh, they wanted Smith and Mighty to produce one of their tracks, which was a track called Any Love, which was another Burt Bacharach cover version. And between the Massive Attack and Smith and Mighty tracks, at that time, they were actually underground successes. So then you had the London crew, people from London, A&R-men running down wanting to know who was producing this sound. And we were getting approached by all these different record companies at that time. Massive Attack ended up getting signed up by a guy called Cameron McVeigh. He was the husband of Nana Cherry at the time, because Nana Cherry had a very strong link with Bristol. And Smith and Mighty ended up getting signed up by a guy called Pete Tong, who was a part of London Records. Now, I wasn't involved in that signing up record deal at the time. I was just being managed by Smith and Mighty's manager, and my first professional job was mixing an album for Maxi Priest, which I thought I was way out of my depth, but I did it. I pulled it off. But Massive, Smith and Mighty, like I said, was signed up by a guy called Pete Tong. That came from the Smith and Mighty record deal, what went all wrong. Because what happened with that record deal, you see, this is why you've got to be wary of record labels, right? Sometimes it is best to do your own thing. Like I said, there's a fate of two tales, because Massive Attack had a successful record deal. But Smith and Mighty, we had a record deal, we got signed up by Pete Tong for 5 years. And the irony was they signed up Massive Attack, Smith and Mighty for the sound which was underground. But once they signed up, they wanted to make Smith & Mighty have a commercial sound. So basically, everything that Smith & Mighty was submitting to London Records didn't think that it was commercially viable. But yet still, they signed them up for a 6-figure number. That 6-figure number obviously got blown. So that's why probably the term comes from, because they really messed up. So, because back in the day, in the 80s, when you were getting offered that kind of a money, it's quite big money. Especially if you were just used to like making music in your bedroom and not getting anything, you know? So for 5 years, Smith & Mighty was under this record contract, not releasing anything. And it wasn't until, I think it was 1994, that Smith & Mighty were released from that record deal, and I became an official member, and we signed up with a record label called K7 Records, which was based in Germany, and we're able to do what we wanted to do with hardly any time constraints. At that same time, I also got involved with Rob Smith. I mean, even though I was with, I joined up with Smith & Mighty then, me and Rob Smith got together to form another act, or another group called More Rockers. Because at that time, More Rockers, we were, when Smith & Mighty was actually recording their album, we were going up to London and going to these what you call raves, and finding this band, and we got involved with the rave scene, which was parties outside the M25 in London, and everybody would meet up on the motorway and find out where, try to coordinate everything with pages and your handbag phones, and try to find out where these parties were going on. And we were going to these parties, and we seen that whole movement turn from being house music to getting speeded up, and the music was house music, the 4/4, dum, boom, 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 boom. And then later on, the music was getting a little bit faster. They would introduce then breakbeat, like James Brown funky breakbeats on top of these beats, and it became faster, and we started to hear the term jungle. And we started to like this jungle sound, and we were like, gosh, why don't we go back to make some of this as well? Because we would do our Smith & Mighty stuff, or the Smith & Mighty stuff was very down-tempo. It was very down-tempo, very reggae dub orientated, soulful. So the ingredients was basically rough, heavy bass lines, rough, dirty beats with nice soulful vocals on top. That was kind of the formula that we didn't know that wasn't really aware of it. We were just doing it, you know. But really, when you break it down, that was the formula, you know, the rough and the smooth, you know. The black and the white music mingling, you know. I mean, really, we think about it blatantly, it was kind of that, because we were coming from punk, we were coming from pop music, but we were also coming from Jamaican, so this is why, that's why it's rich living there, because you get all these rich mixes, and that was what was being developed in these studios, you know. So myself and Rob started to get involved with this jungle music, and then we formed a group called More Rockers. And as More Rockers, we were making this jungle music, and then you also had another group, you had Ronnie Size represent making their jungle music, and they had the studio above us that Rob and Ray Smith & Mighty was making them use above our studio. So it was like Studio A and Studio B, and this is how Ronnie Size, and they were all making their stuff up in the room upstairs. So that was our other act, which was More Rockers, and we created a little niche for ourselves, because we were making jungle music, but it wasn't very instrumental, it was more vocal stuff. So we created our own niche of jungle music, because a lot of DJs didn't play our stuff because it didn't have vocals on there, but we thought, fuck it anyway, do you know what I mean? We're going to make music with vocals on there, and that was our thing, you know. So we created a little niche for ourselves in the whole jungle music. And also, as far as I'm aware, that was the first jungle album by an artist that wasn't a compilation album. I mean, if anybody finds anything that was, let me know. But as far as I know, that could be, now thinking about it, we weren't aware of any other artist jungle album at the time. So we were quite on it without even knowing it. So yeah, that's a lot of my musical journey. What helped take me around the world to I don't know, I suppose, promoting our music, to promote the sound that was coming from Bristol. People say the Bristol Sound, but I prefer to call it music from Bristol, because, you know, Bristol music isn't, the Bristol Sound isn't just, I don't know, electronic music. In this room, there's loads of musicians who do other things as well, and I like to try to incorporate live music, because the only reason why I didn't do live music was because I couldn't play no live instruments, really. So I like to get musicians on my stuff as well, you know. So I just don't want to pigeonhole Bristol as that. But it is important, I think, that we, you know, that Bristol do get recognised as a place of music. Just like, you know, when you think of Liverpool, people associate Liverpool Beatles, you know. I like Bristol to be recognised as and acknowledged as a place to come to for music, and for the powers that be to support what is going on in Bristol. Because, you know, I meet people when I'm out in Bristol, because I'm still on the club scene, vibrant. I still go out a lot. I got my ears to the ground, and when I speak to a lot of younger people and I ask them where they're from, a lot of the times they're not from Bristol, but the reason why they moved here was because they heard of the Bristol scene, because they heard of the music. They said, oh, I came to Bristol because the music is great music in Bristol, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And you know, when you stand back and look at it, it is. And I think that's something important to sort of, it's important. It's important to have. Do you know what I mean? It is important to protect that, or to have that, or to be recognised for that. You know, what it brings to one of the best places. And by the way, Bristol music is big in Japan. You know, they have a shop in Japan dedicated to Bristol music. Check it out. Check it out. They do. Right? I've been there. I've been there 5 times. Right?
What's the name of the shop?
I don't know. I've got it on my phone. but they have. I mean, we've had a couple come over from Japan, from Tokyo, and they love Bristol so much they decided to have their honeymoon here in the Fekla. Right? They came to the Fekla to have their honeymoon. Right? That's how much they love Bristol.
Vivian Stanshall would be proud of that. He'd be well proud of that.
Who's Vivian Stanshall?
Vivian Stanshall was the lead singer of the Bonzo Dog Doodah band.
Okay.
Back in the 60s. He did the vocals on Tubular Bells with Mike Oldfield.
Right.
Which he actually kind of got done out of a little bit. So his wife wasn't too happy with Mike Oldfield. But him and his wife, Kai Longfellow Stanshall, they sailed Thekla into Bristol. They owned it, and they were the people that had it first and foremost. And it was when they had it, when he was doing this work with the Bonzo Dog Doodah band, that he was doing poetry and music sessions. So it was from him, Vivian Stanshall, that actually created Thekla forevermore, for all eternity, to be a music venue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, interesting, brilliant.
Yeah.
Wicked.
His daughter actually lives in Frome. Who said they were living in Frome?
Who's that? What's that?
Silky Longfellow Stanshall. She lives in Frome.
Good name.
Yeah.
Look out for her.
Yeah. She's actually a counsellor. So, yeah.
Oh, right.
Magic lady.
Yeah.
Silky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Wicked. Yeah.
I mean, it's conscious of time. It's,
Yeah, how long have we got here?
well,
So, I mean, I could.
we kind of give the opportunity for networking again. So, I don't know, have you got a few more minutes? Yeah?
Yeah, no, I just say as well. I mean, not just from my point of view. You know, what gave me a lot of pleasure in doing what I do as well. Even though it's a hard business to be in, very hard business, the music business, as you all probably know. You know, because you've got to decide whether you're going to put all your eggs in one basket, or you're going to decide whether you're going to still carry on with your passion and work at the same time, you know. But what kept me going a lot of the time was the fact that I liked showcasing talent. You know, I had a means of putting down music, making music, and hearing people sing or play, and do you know what? I mean, you sound wicked, you sound really good. Can I put you down on something? Can I record you, you know? And a lot of what Smith and Mighty was about, and myself and more rockers, it was about showcasing talent. You know, it wasn't just for us, it was for, like, you know, to let people who you thought deserved to get heard, for them to be heard. You know, and for me that was a passion of mine as well, was showcasing brilliant singers from Bristol, you know, who can write as well. You know, that was the thing for me. Any questions?
Yeah.
When I think of something else to say, because I'm just kind of like checking my notes as well.
When you were doing your work with Massive Attack, when you were doing your work with More Rockers and Smith and Mighty and that, and you were doing your travel and your national tours, your worldwide tours, did you ever end up having significant experiences, like, you know, like I was talking about earlier with my introduction, about sort of like mental health issues and depression or anxiety and stuff, that influenced or impacted either your capability of work or really influenced your work in creating music projects and creating tracks and stuff like that? It is a form of expression, if you get what I mean.
Well, as far as mental health is concerned, to be honest with you, I never had anything like that. For me, it was just fun. You know, for me, that's what it was. I mean, I have a nephew, and like I said, there's a new music scene, a younger new music scene, and my nephew is called High Five Ghosts. He's a part of a crew called Bandooli Crew, and that Bandooli Crew have people, a guy called Boofy and another guy called Carl and Neek, who are they're making noise in the new music scene, the electronic scene more so, you know. But my nephew, he speaks about, and I think he done a talk here not that long ago, and I think that one of the main things that he was speaking about was to do with mental health in the music scene. And to be honest with you, until he mentioned it, I never really, if I'm being really honest, I never really thought about it. I didn't, but when you mentioned it, I was like, do you know what? He's got something.
Thank you
cool.
very much.
All right, thank you.